Welcome to reality. You're now on the Code of Mind channel. Question of the day: how many cats did Schrödinger kill or not kill before he released this idea into the world? Yeah, it's a joke, but the funny part is, some jokes crack open reality harder than serious lectures ever could. Because Schrödinger's cat isn't about a cat. It's about us. About what we call reality. And about how easily that reality starts to glitch when you ask it one uncomfortable question. Does the world exist by itself? Or does it become real only when someone looks at it? Today we're going into parallel timelines and branching realities, the observer effect, quantum immortality as a hypothesis, and real stories from people who felt strange skips and jumps when eyes like reality reloaded them. Enjoy the video. And yes, we start with that famous cat that somehow is, and isn't, at the same time. Imagine a sealed box. Inside, there's a cat. Inside the same box, there's a mechanism that can trigger if a tiny microscopic event happens. If it triggers, the outcome is tragic. If it doesn't, everything stays normal. The point is, that microscopic event has probability. It may happen, or it may not. And until we open the box and check, quantum logic says the system is in superposition, happened and didn't happen at the same time. And because the cat's fate depends on the system, the model suggests the cat becomes both alive and dead simultaneously, until observation collapses the state. Sounds insane? Exactly. That's why it became a symbol of the quantum era. Because it attacks the most comfortable assumption we all live with. We grow up believing reality is fixed. A chair is a chair even if you don't look at it. A room is a room even if you leave it. Truth is truth even if you deny it. But quantum experiments hint that on the microscopic level, reality behaves differently. And if the micro level is different, then a dangerous idea appears. What if we are just a massive structure built out of that micro level? Now we hit the famous hook, the observer effect. You've heard it 1,000 times. Electrons act like waves or particles. But the real point isn't the slogan, it's the meaning. When we measure a system, we interfere. We define the frame. We force the system to pick a state, and it behaves differently. This isn't mysticism, it's not belief. It's experimental reality. Measurement affects behavior. And here the mind starts doing what it does best, connecting dots in the most disturbing way. If observation changes the micro world, what does attention do to the macro world? Of course, it's childish to say, if electrons change, my thoughts create money. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a subtler truth. Attention influences choice. Choice shapes direction. Direction shapes events. Events build your reality. And suddenly you wonder, maybe the observer isn't just an eye. Maybe the observer is consciousness choosing a branch. Now we step into the topic that either lights people up or makes them click away instantly. Quantum immortality is a thought hypothesis connected to the many worlds interpretation. The idea is, in a probabilistic reality, the world can branch. And if it does, then consciousness may continue observing only in the branch where it still exists. Important note, this is not proven. And proving it directly is almost impossible. Why? Because if the hypothesis is true, subjectively, the observer would always find themselves in the branch where they continue. In other branches, for external observers, the outcome would be different. And this is where people make a dangerous mistake. Some try to treat it like a game. So let me be clear, no tests, no experiments, no trying anything on yourself. We're talking philosophy, not instructions. What matters is this. Why does the theory grip people so hard? Because almost everyone has experienced a missing frame moment. I came across a post online where someone tried to expand this concept without using quantum physics at all. Their logic was basically this. If the universe or multiverse is infinite, then within infinity, every possible event can happen, simply because the number of attempts is infinite. And if consciousness is the output of a neural network, then under the right conditions, not only can a brain pattern repeat, but the subjective sense of I am here could repeat too. Think of it like an infinite library. If the library is infinite, somewhere inside it there will be a book where an entire chapter repeats, then another chapter, then the whole book. The author's idea is, in an infinite reality, your pattern can appear again and again. Weird? Yes. But then they added an even darker thought. Matter is a form of energy. Matter and antimatter annihilate into pure energy. And if all energy balances out in the grand total, you can arrive at the concept of a zero-sum universe. And then comes the philosophical grenade. Maybe the universe is like a mathematical factorization in an equation whose final sum is zero, as if nothing truly exists, and yet everything runs. Then the author uses a game analogy. A character in a video game runs from start to finish. For us, the character dies many times because we see every attempt. But for the character subjectively, there are no past deaths if there's no memory of loading saves. Their story is one continuous line. So the internet conclusion is, maybe we're inside a computer game. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no, I'm saying it's an interesting model, and it highlights something important. We are way too sure that reality must be exactly what we've been trained to assume. Now we move into branching. Classic thought experiments often use a binary result, survive or die. But I prefer models with more than two outcomes, because that's how real life works. For example, you're walking. You hear something sharp behind you. You turn. In that moment, you have three options. 1. Stop. 2. Speed up. 3. Step sideways. 3 micro-choices. 3 different trajectories. And the question is, if branching is even partially true, where does the observer end up? In any branch, the most probable one, the one that preserves the line of consciousness? We don't know. But we do know that life sometimes feels like it behaves as if you skipped over a moment that could have ended differently. Now the most interesting part? Stories. Not horror fiction, real sensations people describe. Story 1. Lost minutes. Someone writes, I remember one point, and then the next point. But there's no film between them. It doesn't have to be about driving. It can be anything. You were on public transport and suddenly realized you're at a different stop. You were walking and suddenly found yourself near a different building. You were climbing stairs and realized you don't remember several floors. The strangest part isn't memory loss. The strangest part is the feeling that reality clicked for a second. And then the mind produces the thought. What if something happened in that gap? Something that ended badly in another branch, and I became aware only in the branch where it didn't. Story 2. It should have happened, but it didn't. Almost everyone has a moment of, that was close. But sometimes the close call feels too intense, too impossible. Like the story should have shifted into a different timeline. But you're standing there, alive, unable to explain how. This brings us to something people confuse with mysticism, but it's really perception and psychology. Sometimes your brain stitches continuity so life makes sense. But sometimes that stitching looks like a cut in someone else's film. And this is where the Mandela effect enters. When thousands remember something one way, but the official version says, it was always different. Logos, movie lines, small cultural details. Sure, it can be memory errors. But the problem is that sometimes it's not just details. It's the sensation. I remember it like I lived in a world where it was that way. And then the Mandela effect becomes not proof of simulation, but a metaphor. As if reality updated, and some people still have cache from the previous version. Now the key point. This video isn't here to prove we live in a simulation. And it's not here to fight about whether quantum immortality exists. It's about this. What happens to your life if you allow, even for a moment, this possibility? Your timeline is sensitive to your inner state. If the observer affects the system at the micro level, then at the human level it may look like what inner script you repeat, what decisions you make, what you accept as normal, what you fear, what you believe. And then, a branch of reality, isn't magic. It's a trajectory you build from repeated choices. I'm not asking you to believe. I'm asking you to observe. If you've ever felt, I should have died, but somehow I didn't. I remember the world slightly different. Time sped up. Reality started responding. Write about it in the comments. Because the most interesting thing begins where words don't match, but experience does. And in the next part, I'll read another post from the internet. More intense, more unsettling. And we'll follow that logic further, without fear, without shutting down the mind halfway through. Thanks for being here. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.